they were pretty enthusiastic. In fact, it was born even before I began the Civil War. I thought, boy, I'd love to do a couple-hour thing on baseball. I loved it. I played it all my life. It's a subject I know something about. All the films I do are subjects I don't know something about, and I want to know. I mean, too often documentary films are telling people what you ought to know. They're the expressions of already arrived at ends. Mine have been a process of discovery. I'm sharing with you what I've discovered. Hey, want to hear what I've learned? And people respond to that as opposed to the exposition or even didacticism implicit in the other version. But I'd always wanted to do something on baseball, and as I began baseball, it still was sort of modest in scope. And then after the success of the Civil War, PBS was excited that it might be multi-part. We said maybe 9 one-hours, calling it 9 innings. They'd be basically the decades of the game. And almost immediately I discovered how little I knew, and almost immediately I discovered, most important, that I was making the sequel to the Civil War. That you could continue to tell American history with presidents and wars and generals, but it didn't get you access to the heart of the country. And here was baseball that spoke to immigration and assimilation, each wave of immigrant group that sought the permanent status of membership in this American society, not just from a piece of paper from the State Department, but by participating in the in the national pastime of their adopted country. It's about race, the central reason why the Civil War came. The finest moment in baseball is when Jack Roosevelt Robinson, the grandson of the slave, makes his way in 1947 to play ball, and that before that the Negro Leagues and other African Americans struggled. This was the exclusion of women, the growth and decay and rebirth of big cities, the nature of popular culture and advertising, how heroes are born, what's the nature of villainy and fools within a popular culture. Baseball covered all of that, and it's also the greatest game that's ever invented. So I suddenly realized, Shelby Foote said in the Civil War that the Civil War defined us. Well, if you wanted to know what we became, you could do no better than to follow baseball, because all the other subsequent wars were there as the game responded to it. It's the only thing that offered a kind of daily continuity of who we are, besides the Constitution. And we could find ourselves in it. And so I made a film that people thought I was nuts when I'd say this is the sequel to the Civil War film, but it is. It was. Well, without a doubt, just as Shelby Foote emerged from the Civil War as sort of the conscience, the soul of that film, Buck O'Neil, who was an old Negro League player, mostly with the Kansas City Monarchs, and later became the first black coach, third base coach for the Chicago Cubs, and more importantly, one of the greatest human beings who has ever walked this earth, graced us with his presence and became the symbol of the kind of baseball that was not nostalgic and sentimental, that was clear-eyed, but filled with love and generosity and grace. And that's how Buck was. When you meet him, anybody, in an elevator in a hotel, sitting down for an interview for a documentary filmmaker, anywhere, the President of the United States, you had a sense that he woke up to see you that day, and he bestowed on you a kind of generosity and heart that I think actually belittles the rest of our narrow lives. I mean, to me, the Bible says, our religious traditions say that man is made in God's image. I don't know whether that's true, but if it is true, then Buck O'Neil's as close to God as anybody